last segment this morning, folks. And in this segment, we're going to tackle the idea that the EPA has come out and done a couple of things. One, they have delayed some regulations they were planning on imposing on you. And they've delayed them because they don't dare let these regulations pass before November. I mean, is there anything that this administration is not willing to turn into a political game? I mean, the EPA is one of the most destructive agencies in the country across all aspects of the nation. I mean, there are other agencies out there that do damage and, like focused, concentrated damage, laser beam kind of damage in specific industries and so forth and so on. But the EPA is kind of like an atomic bomb. They just blow up and indiscriminately just wipe stuff out. It's just incredible to me. And they cover, because they wield so much power. And they cover the Clean Water Act and the Clean Air Act and pollution and all these different things. So they can attribute almost anything to almost anything. Their rationale in a comment the other day was that now Regina McCarthy, she's the new head of the EPA, because the last one resigned, but it was only because she knew she was about to get caught with her finger in the cookie jar, or her hand in the cookie jar. This is the one who was using a private email account to keep the emails from out of the hands of people like the Judicial Watch and the Freedom of Information Acts that they could file, right? I mean, that's corruption, ladies and gentlemen, that is on a scale that no one should be willing to accept or even grant, any credible excuse for. The whole idea of why emails are retained is so that there's some proof of what people were doing. It's called accountability. And for the head of the EPA to be using, a private email account, one that's not secure, and she's sending all kinds of information that should have been secured, including a lot of individuals' personal information and companies and, all kinds of stuff. But to make matters worse, she was doing it with the specific intent of hiding the truth from those who may seek it later. Huh? Nothing happened. She resigned. Full benefits, full pension. Now she's off probably figuring out how to write a book with a ghostwriter because she's too stupid to write one herself. And she's going to sit there and write a book and publish it and, get $250,000 upfront payment and ride off into the sunset. So the new one, Regina McCarthy, comes in. And she's not satisfied with the damage that was done by the last tyrant in office. She's going to make things even worse. Now she's claiming that pollutions hold African Americans back. Only African Americans? I mean, say it ain't so. Really? She's essentially called pollution a force of racism. If this wasn't so horrible, I'd cry. But I got to laugh about it because if not, I'd spend my entire day in tears for our country, weeping for the destruction of common sense, rational thinking, intelligence. She actually has the nerve to say that pollution is holding back millions of African Americans. How do you justify that? I mean, it's a claim. She says that, I'll tell you what her justification is for it, and then you can really get a good laugh or grit your teeth, whichever is your method of dealing with bad news. She claims that black students are vulnerable to climate change, the most vulnerable to climate change. and that they should become champion climate justice advocates. So let's see. Was this really just a thinly veiled recruitment statement to get people onto the social justice train? Or is she really concerned? I mean, she made some other comments too at this press conference that she held in Atlanta University, Clark Atlanta University, and it was sponsored by the Hip Hop Caucus. Hello, that's a real whatever. And the Hip Hop Caucus claims to mobilize, educate, and engage young people in elections, policymaking, and service projects. Okay. So she came back and she said that, black students are the most vulnerable to climate change and that they should become champion climate justice advocates. Climate justice advocates. Notice the key words that she's using there. She's saying that they need to be climate justice. The word justice, when it is used by this administration, is always attributable to how you can have something because you're owed. You're a victim. The word justice, for all intents and purposes, intones that there must be a victim, right? I mean, justice can't be had. There is no justice if you're a victim endlessly. And these people routinely use the victimization mentality to, and I think, inartfully, this is what Bundy was saying the other day, is that he was accused of racism for, is that, the enslavement mentality of these people in power who constantly give you excuses for, it's the enabling mentality of a person who, says, I'll give you more money, knowing full well that person's going to take that money and go out and buy alcohol with it, and that they're a terrible, diseased alcoholic. The enabler who says, I'm not gonna say anything, even though I know that you're abusing our children. The mother who sits there and says, I know he's abusing the kids, and I'm not going to say anything because I don't want to end our marriage. What? Are you insane? This is the same mentality. It's no different. These people are saying, we're going to enable you, and it engages your weakness for you to be told that you're a victim constantly. They want to promote political activism, not because the political activism will actually help the activist, but because it helps them to achieve their agenda by being able to say, see, I can point to one more person who's online with us. They're doing our work for us. See, you're an intern in the school of treason, self-treason. You're an intern. You're not even getting paid. At least have the temerity to demand money. Oh, I'm sorry. You can't do that. Then you'd be Congress. I mean, look, when you are going to sit here and tell me that victimization is a philosophy under which you should live your life, that's insane. That's insane. I'm not saying that there aren't real victims of racism or real victims of bullying or real victims of pollution. There are. But let me tell you something. They're not in the sense and in the manner in which they'd have you believe. I mean, here they throw out this war on woman nonsense, which is, I mean, if you just look at the source of who's telling you that it's a war on women, you'll find that that particular organization and group are the ones who are actually the most guilty of it. There's an adage that applies. And it applies in politics as well as everywhere else in life. And it came from a Shakespearean play. It's I've forgotten which one it is, but it's, methinks thou dost protesteth too much. What that means is the guy who's usually standing there railing the loudest about something is usually guilty of it. And I mean, I'm not saying it's a hard and fast rule you can take to the bank and nail to the wall. But I got to tell you, it is true. The people who are screaming the loudest. I mean, I'm going to give you a perfect example. You got this guy in Illinois who was a Democrat yesterday, and it was all over the Drudge Report, and if you didn't see it, it was enough to make you vomit. This is a guy who is a child molester. He's a sitting House member in the Illinois State House, a Democrat, which, by the way, makes no difference. There's plenty of Republicans who are pedophiles, too. But this guy takes it to a whole different level. He says, and this was his quote, 12 is about as old as I can handle. 6, 7, and 8, that's the right age for me. Now, forget the fact that we, at this point, want to put this man to death in a slow and painful manner. But here's the point. When you have, this guy was passing legislation to increase the penalties for child pornography. And he was using his state-owned computer in the State House to get it and swap it with other people. Methinks he doth protesteth too much. The guy who's standing there screaming about how he hates gays the most. The guy who's sitting there screaming. I'll give you another example. This piece of human awful trash, that white supremacist guy who shot those Jewish people, not because they did something wrong to him, just because they were Jews. Here's a guy who has been a white supremacist all his life, right? And turns out he's an FBI informant. So right off the bat, here's a guy who's a total piece of human awful. In other words, he's a white supremacist. He rails against the government all the time, but then he's actually an informant for the government that he rails against. Methinks thou doth protesteth too much. Then he hates blacks, and he's railing against blacks, saying he's a KKK member and blah, 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 blah. And yet, he's caught with a black prostitute in a car by the police. And then he says he hates gays. Well, it turns out it wasn't just a black prostitute. It was a black transvestite prostitute. So it was really a man dressed as a woman, and he was having sex. I mean, my point is simply this. This concept of this victimization mentality, when you are, these people in government have just taken the protesting concept to a more refined level. Instead of protesting on behalf of themselves, they protest on behalf of you. But they're the ones who are guilty the most of violating that which they protest against. Think about it. Watch it. Look at it for what it is and be willing to say, I will admit truth when I see it for myself. McCarthy, she's encouraging black students who are most vulnerable to climate change to become champion climate justice advocates by supporting some of the FDA rules currently being pushed by environmental activists. She mentioned, quote, greenhouse gas emission standards for new power plants that the agency released last fall and the rules for existing plants. So what she's saying is, no, fight against your own best interest. Create high electricity bills for yourself that you already can't pay because you're living in poverty because you're black. Hello? I mean, look, high utility rates are the high cost of being poor. That is an oppression alone of not just blacks, but poor whites and poor Asians and poor Mexicans and poor Indians and poor everybody else. It's the high cost of being poor. Ladies and gentlemen, use your wetware, okay? This woman is probably making somewhere around $200,000 a year. She has a number of bennies on top of that. She's been a lifelong member of government. She's never had a real true job where she actually had to worry about the risk of being let go for, lack of performance or anything along those lines. Her life is so completely and totally separate from yours that the realities of the two are like, remember the old show Lifestyles of the Rich and Famous by that British guy? I can't think of his name. It's Lifestyles of the Rich and Famous. People watched that because it was such a phenomenon to them that people could actually live like that. I mean, they never experienced anything like that in their lives. They'd never even been inside of a limo, much less inside of a house that was 30,000 square feet and had gold chandeliers and, 9 bathrooms. The people who are running this don't have any connection to you whatsoever. And they're sitting here and telling you to fight and be an activist against greenhouse gas emission standards for power plants, to knock coal plants out of power. What they're really telling you is fight against your own best interest, because when these coal plants are put out of power, we don't have anything to replace them. Wind and solar only generate, 6 or 7% of the country's power needs. Coal produces 40 or 45%. Might even be higher than that. I've seemed to remember 67, but I could be wrong. It doesn't even matter. The point is that the disparity is so great that you're never going to get alternative energy solutions to replace coal. The technology is not there. The cost effectiveness isn't there. End of argument. Unless the government's going to fund everybody to put a windmill on their house, it ain't going to happen. And so sitting there and arguing against a coal-fired plant is only going to do what? It's going to raise the cost of electricity. And the minority population, who is already downtrodden because they can't get a job because they're black, which is the whole argument in the first place, guess what? Your electricity bill just went up too. And all by a woman who has never even opened her electric bill because she's got people to do it for her. This is a woman who's got so much wealth that she doesn't make her own meals. She's got a maid who cleans her house. She's got someone to go do her laundry, somebody to walk her dog. She's got somebody to wipe her butt if she's too lazy to do that. Tell me what the correlation is between the haves telling the have-nots what's best for them. Tell me how there's any justification for that. Tell me why you would fall for that. I mean, who wants Bill Gates to be telling them how hard it is to be poor? Huh? No difference here, folks. This is all politics, and it's all brainwashing, and it's all manipulation, and it's all propaganda. And, as if the minority communities in this country, and when I say minorities, I'm not just talking color. I'm talking about educational minority. These are the kids who can't get a decent education because the schools suck so bad. Not because they're out of money, because the teachers' unions won't allow them to get rid of the bad teachers. And there are bad teachers. There are good teachers too. But there's a lot of bad teachers we can't get rid of. And there's a lot of money wasted and squandered and stolen. And we're spending $100 billion a year for the Department of Education. That's $2 billion per state every year. What are you getting for your $2 billion in your state? What are you getting? Really? $2 billion a year from your state. What are you getting from the federal government? I mean, your school decisions are supposed to be made locally. That's a federal law, and it's most state laws. So what are you getting for it? Nothing. They get $100 billion of taxpayer money. For what? So that they can indoctrinate your school and your school board members to, make sure that there's some agenda in there about it's all a hoax, ladies and gentlemen. It is like you are being brainwashed on every facet of the diamond. But think of it in the sense of a diamond. A diamond, and all, I know those of you who are gemologists out there or, the engineer types, you're going to take umbrage with this analogy, but tough. No diamond is manufactured in the shape it's in. They're cut. But the point is simply this. Diamonds are made by pressure. Diamonds are made by pressure from multiple sides, compounding on this carbon until they force it into a diamond over eons. The diamond is being pressed on all sides now, but being pressed on all sides not by a positive force, but by a negative force. And the diamond of our population, the diamond of our self-confidence as a nation, the diamond of our ability to think our way clear, the diamond of our ability to discern right from wrong, to discern good from bad, is under pressure to the point where it's about to just, it's instead of applying the pressure equally from all sides, think of taking a diamond and you put it in a vise. You crank that dagnab thing down hard enough and guess what? It's going to shatter. This garbage that we get from the EPA about coal. Hey, listen, I want clean air too. But until you've got an alternative solution, shut up. Just shut up. Stop telling us that coal is dangerous for us when you don't have an alternative solution. I acknowledge it's not the best solution. But right now, it's the only solution. Now, if you want to go through a phased-in period where you migrate stuff out, that's great. But you're not going to do it at an accelerated pace at the point of a gun. I mean, ladies and gentlemen, an 80-year-old can only run so fast. You can point that gun at that person's head all you want and say, run faster. It's not going to help. And what you're going to end up doing is killing them. And that's where we are. We're being herded at the point of a gun at a rate and at a pace we cannot maintain. The EPA is driving us, herding us to destruction. And ultimately, those of us who are high enough that we're able to look a little further ahead, we realize that we're being herded to a cliff edge, not to some corral. The Wyoming governor came out the other day and say, I would say this administration is certainly unfriendly towards coal. And in my view, this is a war on coal. I got to tell you, this is not a war on coal. It's a war on the country. Being perpetrated by an executive agency, being used and wielded as a weapon of war, a weapon of mass destruction against the American people, against the minorities in this country, whose minds they're filling with such nonsensical crap and drivel as the fact that you're subjected to greater damage by pollution because you're black than if you're white. I'm so sick of lies. And I'm tired of people who tell them. And you know what? I got to imagine Gina McCarthy, Regina, Gina, whatever they want to call her, she's smarter than that. I got to imagine that almost everybody who's engaged in the betrayal of our nation has full knowledge that what they're doing is wrong. And that makes it a special level of treason. It's one thing to be an ideologue and be stupid and just be an ideologue because, you don't know any better. But when the truth is all around you, when the proof is all around you, when you can look right at your neighbor on your left and your neighbor on your right and say, that person's actions are unconstitutional. They shouldn't be doing that as a member of the government. Knowing that it reflects back on you and that you're the same visage coming back in the mirror and that you have guilty knowledge for the acts that you're committing, Ladies and gentlemen, that's a special kind of self-treason, too. You've been listening to America's Voice Now. Find us on the web at americasvoicenow.org. America's Voice Now. You can also email me at mike@americasvoicenow.org. You all have a great day. We'll see you tomorrow morning. God bless. Keep your powder dry and pay attention to what's going on around you.